Good afternoon. Hope everyone's doing well. Today's topic is about revealing your cyber truth. And the cyber truth is in context of the ability to detect different types of attacks, and in turn, and in response, our ability to prevent a minor compromise to become a full-scale breach. And so my conversation today will begin by talking about kind of where are the intelligent gaps in our environment, because those are what's keeping us from having the cyber truth. And so if you think about your organization today and the places where you have gaps, those gaps are where they're likely to have the most damage to you as an organization. In many cases from our experiences, working with many big banks and governments, as well as the education sectors, for example, we know that there's a big gap when it comes to unmanaged devices. What are those? Any IoT device, for example, your IP camera, your IP phone, your printer, your legacy system, especially for the telco companies, as well as potentially very mission-critical revenue-generating services like database, where you do not necessarily want to have it managed with an agent. So this is a potential gap in intelligence that might compromise your cyber truth. The other kind of information that can potentially be a gap is encrypted data. Now, bad actors oftentimes will hide among your normal production enterprise data / noise. And so the result is it's oftentimes a great place for a hacker to hide, as well as to provide a gap in your current cyber truth. And so when you have these gaps, obviously there can be consequences to them. And those consequences can be in the form of extortion, exploitation, or potentially a full-scale extinction if not treated at earlier stages. And I think that's very well documented. So today I'm going to talk about the intelligent gap and how that pertains to our cyber truth, and help you hopefully think about your own security organization, your own posture, and when it comes to the ability to detect. And let's start out with the SOC visibility triad. All right, so this is provided by Gartner, and it's a good way to look about what's the foundational data sources in our security posture today. So we have SIEM, log-based instrumentation of critical services. You have EDR, or endpoint detection and response, where you're installing in a host on a agent on a specific host. And the third piece of the puzzle that oftentimes goes unnoticed or underappreciated until recently is network detection and response, or NDR. And all three sources of information are foundational, they're complementary, and they're all part of having a mature security ecosystem to get to the cyber truth. And so if you think about you going to a doctor and saying you have a sore throat, or that I have an aching tummy, that's self-reported information. And that's kind of what a log provides, right? A log is only as good as what a developer has decided to expose to you as a monitoring solution. It's very useful information to self-report to your doctor you have a sore throat or you have an aching tummy, but that shouldn't be the be-all, end-all source of cyber truth. The network is a really great source of truth for observational information. It's not based on what you report, it's based on what's being observed. So it's kind of like a CAT scan, an MRI, or even potentially a PCR, where it's an unbiased observation of what's happening. So when you go to a doctor, it's good to have self-reported information, such as logs and endpoint, but you need to complement it with observational information, information that actually has occurred. And so that's these three sources of information that really round out what we considered cyber truth. Now, network data is not new, right? We use them with our firewalls, our IDS, IPS, next-gen, proxies. But what's making NDR different from, let's say, next-gen firewall is the fact that it's not just about securing the perimeter anymore. It's not just about what we call north-south, but also looking at within the perimeter, the east-west, as we call it, user-to-user interaction, user-to-server interaction, server-to-server communications, because those are where there's oftentimes an intelligent gap which compromises the cyber truth. So if we talk about the ability to look at a good analytics to provide cyber truth, it comes down to three things. On the top right-hand corner, we have the attack surface discovery. Before we can do detections, we have to have a good coverage of your environment, and that means understanding all users, all interactions, all applications, and all assets and what they're doing. Once you have that foundation of visibility to observe all of these interactions, not just where you install the agents, not just where you're instrumented with logs, but observing all interactions, now you can start talking about detections. And the detections is great, but it's not very useful unless you can action upon them, right? Otherwise, it's just noise. And I think most SOCs do not have a shortage of detections. They have a shortage of the ability to quickly acknowledge and investigate, to quickly delineate a true versus a false positive. And so that's where Extrahop has been positioning itself as an analytics platform to really provide visibility into what's going on in the overall ecosystem. Everything from discovering, understanding your inventory, and ultimately, once you have that foundation, to make sure you can mitigate your risk with the cyber truth, as well as achieving business outcomes as a result of securing and being very confident of your overall security posture. And so Extrahop provides three sources of information that I think is worth highlighting at the end: detections, attack surface, and investigations. Now, as an industry, we've been very fixated on machine learning detections. These very complicated, whether it's supervised, unsupervised, it's machine learning, it's a behavior-based, user behavior-based anomaly. These are kind of the what we call unknown unknowns. These are great. They're great for detecting certain types of attacks, but they shouldn't be the be-all, end-all, right? We came from the world of rules and signatures that still have their place in time, right? There's certain types of specific attacks, certain CVEs, where you have a very high signal-to-noise ratio with certain rules and signatures. You don't necessarily need to have very expensive computation with machine learning to flag certain types of rules, signatures, or even a match with threat intelligence. And on the last side of the spectrum is not necessarily real attacks, but basically security hygiene. And that can be anything from cryptographic compliance, like insecure cipher suites, weak cipher suites, expired certificates. These are all things, insecure protocols that are in plain text. These are things, as a network, you will immediately see, not based on some scanning, but based on actual observations that are actually happening with real users hitting real servers. So detections is a full spectrum. There's the machine learning for unknown unknowns. There's the rules, signatures, and IOCs threat intel for known bads. And then there's the hygienes for more of a proactive stance in our detection capabilities. So that's detections. Detections is great, but you need to have the breadth to cover the attack surface. And that's where having an understanding of your overall ecosystem. It's not just your data center on-premise. It's in the cloud. It's the ability to understand users accessing SASE. It's the ability to understand your branch users coming into your data center. And you need to have the breadth in terms of the attack surface to really engage your cyber truth, right? It cannot just be a great tool for your on-premise or a great tool for your cloud. You need to have the breadth to understand the full attack surface. And once you have the great breadth, you have the ability to detect, like I mentioned. It's also very important to be able to do the investigations. An attack is just noise unless you can action upon them. And so that goes and means you need to have the right forensic data to give you the high fidelity to quickly determine a true versus a false positive. And nowadays, we move very fast. There's new cyber intelligence comes out where we know about new indicators of compromise, new different types of attacks. So it's not just about detecting it today based on the information I have, but having the forensic information to do retrospective analysis. And that's very important by having really detailed oriented information for long periods of time. So when we have this new novel attack, we can historically go back in time to see if there was any compromises, not today, but 2, 3, 4, 6 months ago. And so those are kind of the concepts that we have to worry about when we talk about the ability to detect, provide the breadth with the attack surface, and then action upon the detections with a really streamlined and detailed investigation. And that's kind of what Extrahop does. We're a network analytics platform that provides real-time analytics of your network passively without any agents. We're looking at network from layer 2 all the way to application level 7, That means SQL statements, file share names, user authentication, DNS logins. And then we also have the ability to do real-time decryption of that traffic. So if you do have specific traffic that you need strategically decrypt, Extrahop is here for you to do that. And so feel free to stop by our booth to see a demo, and we'll catch you again next time. Thank you.
A round of applause, please, once again for Mr. Chu. And thank you, sir, for that revelation of our cyber truth, if you will. You know, finding and plugging those gaps in intelligence, as he says, from devices to data and everything in your ecosystem. There is really a smart defense for that as well. So thank you once again to all of our plenary speakers. Let's give them all a big round of applause, please, ladies and gentlemen. That was really very helpful, I think, for us to collate and prepare ourselves in battling this cyber war.